Okay, good morning, government. This morning I'm going to quickly go over the notes on constitutional rights. This is what I'm referring to. Hopefully you guys have accessed these on Classroom. I think the best way to go about doing this would be to take a look at them as I'm talking about them, and we'll go from there. So, rights are kind of a hallmark of American government. When you go around the world, one of the things I've noticed is that people will be very admirable of the rights that Americans enjoy. And of course, rights are something that kind of are written into our DNA as Americans, this idea that we are free to do certain things without any type of government interference. So, one of the things that I want to talk about very quickly is, you probably haven't ever thought about this, but why do local and state governments have to honor the National Bill of Rights, the National Constitution's Bill of Rights? Because initially, when the Constitution was written, they didn't. So if you look on the slide, a couple slides in 1833, there's a Supreme Court case known as Barron versus Baltimore. I'm not going to go into the details of this case. I would if we were in class, but for keeping it short, basically a man sued a city. The city was Baltimore, Maryland, right? And Baltimore, Maryland obviously is not the federal government. So in 1833, when Barron sues Baltimore, the Bill of Rights do not apply to the states, okay? So he had a good case, and he probably would have won his case, but when he gets to the Supreme Court says that the Bill of Rights only apply to the national government, okay? So in Barron versus Baltimore, 1833, the Bill of Rights do not apply to the state or the local government. So let's think about what that means for a minute. At Glacier High School, you guys know that we have school resource officers. And under this ruling, the school resource officers wouldn't have to honor our Fourth Amendment right to privacy when it comes to searches and seizures. Or the administration of Glacier High School wouldn't have to respect our freedom of speech or our freedom of religion, right? So that's troubling. So what changes that makes the Bill of Rights apply to the state and local governments, right? So what changes is something called the 14th Amendment. Now, the 14th Amendment was added after the Civil War. There were three amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th, that were added right after the Civil War to change the country so that we could reflect what happened during the Civil War. So the 13th Amendment gets rid of slavery. The 15th Amendment says that black men can vote. But the 14th Amendment says that no state, well, it says a couple things, but one of the things that it says is that no state can violate your fundamental liberties, right? And what this says is that, again, that no state can violate your fundamental liberties. So one of the things that I'll tell you guys is that 14th Amendment is really, really an important part of the Constitution. Obviously not in the original Constitution, added in 1868. But now let's go back and let's see what happens to the Bill of Rights once the 14th Amendment has been added. So it takes a couple decades. It's not until 1925 that this actually comes to light. But in 1925, there's this guy named Barry Goodloe, and he lives in New York City. And New York State, the state of New York, has a law that says that you cannot have any speech that criticizes or plots to overthrow the government, right? So this was right after World War I. We were very fearful of communism. Even way back then in 1925, the Russian Revolution had happened in 1917 as the first country to go to a communist government. We were super paranoid about that. So Barry Goodloe, he's a communist. And one of the things that he starts doing is passing out these pamphlets on the streets of New York that call for the overthrow of the government. It says that we should adopt a communist government. Now, obviously, that speech violates this New York state law, right? But what happens is that Goodloe gets arrested, gets convicted under this state law. But once he gets convicted, he says, well, wait a minute here. The First Amendment of the National Constitution says that I have freedom of speech. I just said we should overthrow the government. I didn't, stockpile weapons or plan this. I was just talking out loud. And I should be able to do that, right? So the Supreme Court reviews this, and they agree with them. They say, you know what? The First Amendment does say that Congress shouldn't suppress your free speech. And although we're not really wild about what Goodloe was talking about, we think that he should be able to say it. So they reverse his conviction, and they rule that the First Amendment applies to the states. And then since 1925, more and more rights have been applied to the states, right? So freedom of religion, the Fourth Amendment protections from unreasonable searches and seizures, all of these things have been applied to the state. So that is the process of what we call incorporation. The 14th Amendment incorporated the fundamental rights of the Bill of Rights to the state level governments. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. That's the doctrine or the process of incorporation. And that, again, means that the Bill of Rights, because of the 14th Amendment, now apply to the state and local governments. So we'll do freedom of religion in the very next video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys hopefully in the next video on freedom of religion. Thanks.